I'm not saying that the sweater cured my depression, but we don't have clinical studies. Who's to say it didn't? This is a very overdue knitting podcast episode. This is where I share my current works in progress and my recently finished objects. I have 2 sweaters that I'm very overdue talking about in this video, and then I also have 2 cardigans that are like 99% finished to show you, and a swatch for a little future project. If I get to talk about that, I'm not quite sure which direction I'm gonna go with it, so we'll discuss. So the first finished object to talk about is this tarot card sweater. So I've shared this off and on in like quite a few videos. I most recently talked about it in my 2023 knits video. This is one of my favorite projects that I made the last year, and I finished this in around October. This is made with a US 5 needle and then US 3 for the hems, like the ribbed part. And I made this in Cascade 220 Sport, which is the sport weight version of like the classic Cascade 220, which is 100% wool. Cascade did send me the yarn for free after I asked if they would sponsor the design, but to be candid about it, like I went out looking for which yarn I wanted to use, and then when I decided on Cascade 220 Sport, I was like, oh, I wonder if they would send it to me if I asked them, and they did, which was great. To be honest, I'm not that good at influencing, so this is like very unusual for me to have sponsored yarn. And I've reached out to several companies who just never answered me about it, so anyway. That's exciting that they sent it for this. I do think that this yarn ended up being pretty perfect for the project. So the first version I made was with a DK weight yarn that was super wash blend. I used Barocco vintage DK and then Drops Cotton Merino, and that one was just like sagging out of control. So the card dimensions got super stretched. So I also redid the chart on this one to make it kind of shorter and wider. In the end, I ended up wishing that I had made the card slightly longer on this one because this yarn is a lot lighter weight, and also since it's 100% wool and not superwash, it actually sticks to itself pretty well. So that means that it's not like getting stretched out under its own weight as much as the superwash was. So I kind of wish that I had changed the dimensions of the card a little bit. This sweater's in testing right now, and for that one, I have one more like little line of water on the card. That's what I wish I had done on mine. So I was kind of just like fixing that because I wish that it had a little bit more length. But yeah, this yarn was really great. I didn't have any bleeding, which is really nice when you're doing a very high contrast design like this. I did block my swatch. I like soaked it for a while to make sure that the navy wasn't going to bleed into the white. I just think you should always block a swatch with any color work. You just want to make sure that like you don't put all this time in and then end up with something muddy from bleeding dye, especially if you like to do really saturated colors. They tend to bleed more. I made this one flat. I knit this one flat, but I kind of did it in like a modular seamless style where I knit the back panel flat, and then I picked up the shoulders and joined it through the neck, and then I knit the front and back in like separate panels and seamed them up the sides afterwards before picking up and doing the sleeves in the round and the collar in the round. And the reason for that is that this is like not an all over design, so it doesn't really make sense for stranded color work, but I just hate intarsia. I just don't like it. And I did one swatch trying to use intarsia, and I just found it so annoying. I get like frustrated by the tangling yarns. I don't think I'm that great at the technique, like the join where you go from one color to the other. It tends to be a little bit gappy for me or look a little bit too tight, and I just wasn't happy with it. So I structured it so that it would be knit flat because I wanted to be able to do stranded color work back and forth just over the card segment. So you can see that here, and I use a technique called ladderback jacquard, which has, you like catch the floats by basically knitting them on the wrong side of the work, which sounds more confusing than it is. I think it actually ends up being really intuitive. The only thing that I found a little bit difficult about it is sometimes when you're looking at the, like these stitches are on the wrong side of the work. You have to move your working yarn forward before you work these in the contrast color, and I found that the only difficulty was sometimes looking at the stitches on my needles and being like, wait, there's like 3 navy stitches and then a white, but there's supposed to be 5 navy stitches and then a white. And then realizing that like the one that I thought was an error is actually the ladderback jacquard stitch. So one of my testers, who's amazing, I'm so embarrassed that I don't know how to pronounce her username. I should ask her about that. I'll put it here. She's so amazing to work with. She tested my Prima pullover too, but she suggested always doing the ladderback jacquard stitch in the opposite of what you are doing the rest of the stitches. So on the right side of the work, purl your ladderback jacquard stitch, and on the wrong side of the work, knit your ladderback jacquard stitch, and that just gives you a visual cue so you won't mix up, like, is this white stitch supposed to be on the right side or the wrong side? If it's the opposite stitch of the rest of them, you know that that's the ladderback jacquard stitch. So I thought that was really clever. So I added a note to do that in the pattern too. Other things that I changed for the pattern versus my version is I added a little bit more upper shoulder shaping to the pattern. And then I also added a little bit more length. And that was because, two reasons. One, for adding the length, I just wish that I had made mine a tiny bit longer. It's like it's not super cropped, but it is kind of a cropped sweater. But I feel like for the amount of ease that the sweater has, it's nice to have it be a little bit longer. I don't really love like a very tented out look. And if you have a lot of positive ease, but you crop the sweater, it can kind of start to feel a little tenty, I guess. And I feel like I made the back of mine a little bit too short. And that was honestly, I think, my impatience to finish this and wear it to rhinebeck. That's fixed in the pattern. And then the other thing is that I actually made the sleeves smaller than I meant for them to be. So they are kind of lightly tapered, which I do like on this sweater. Like, I didn't want them to be really loose, especially because the body of the sweater is pretty loose. The reason I wanted the body of the sweater to be quite loose is I don't want it to follow your curves, because that would like distort the card image. So I wanted it to be kind of like a flat tapestry on your chest. So that's why it has about 6 inches of positive ease. I made the sleeves a little bit tighter. I think I had 3.5 inches of positive ease or 4 inches of positive ease on the sleeves. But I can't remember if I sized down a needle size or if I just happened to knit tighter in the round. But my sleeves came out a bit tighter than I intended them to. So I fixed that a little bit in the pattern, but that was also, I think, kind of a technique problem for me, that they came out tighter. But again, I was really trying to wear this at rhinebeck, and I was finishing in October. So I knew the first sleeve was tighter than I wanted, but then I was like, whatever, I just want to finish this and wear it. So that's how I ended up with that. I think it still is cute like this, and of course you can always add more of a taper if you want to any pattern by just doing the decreases more frequently, but I think a little bit looser would just kind of add to the like really casual baggy feel. Other elements about the construction, so it's like a modified drop shoulder, which is where you have some increases at the underarms on the front and the back, and then some underarm cast on, rather than like a classic drop shoulder. This shoulder width will just be the full width of your bust. And I find that I like having things kind of anchored to the shoulders more. This is also some feedback that I've gotten from plus size testers. For instance, for my prep school pullover, I made that one like kind of a classic modified drop shoulder where you have an underarm cast on, but you're not doing any increases. And I did that to make it like more beginner friendly, I guess. But I did get some feedback that some people wished that they had a smaller shoulder width. That's kind of like a classic issue with the drop shoulder silhouette, that not everyone loves how it feels on them. So I think this kind of modified drop shoulder silhouette is like a nice balance in between, where you still don't have to fuss around with like a fitted sleeve cap and you still get an oversized look. But since it's like this width is anchored to your shoulders rather than to your bust, it's not going to hang down so far if you have a larger bust relative to your shoulders. So, and that's just because like people's busts tend to grow at a faster rate than your shoulders do, because this is more of like, I don't know, a skeletal anchoring point, versus your bust, obviously, especially for a lot of women, like your bust is going to be larger proportionally. In general, this was like a really special, meaningful project to me. I shared this a little bit in my 2023 knits video, but when I cast this one on, I was kind of going through a hard time last year, and I really liked the idea of having this project that felt like kind of a meditative process, and like I would be creating this really meaningful, almost like a talisman of positive intentions that I could wear. So that's why I chose the star card. Coincidentally aligns well with my knitting brand name, Star Cross Knits, but that was actually like by coincidence. I just really love this card in tarot. So it represents renewal, hope, inspiration, opportunity, light at the end of darkness. And that was just like a feeling that I was really trying to channel. So I feel like I'm really glad that I chose that. You know, you think about all the time that you spend with a sweater. I feel like having this project that had this really positive intent behind it is like a really special, fulfilling way for me to be spending that time, if that makes sense. Like, I'm not a super spiritual person, but I do definitely believe in like the power of narrative and the power of storytelling and the power of like you know, the way that you think about yourself and your future can affect the way that you act and the way that you feel, at least very much for me. And I'm not saying that like, you know, if you're depressed, obviously there's a lot of other ways to make interventions. And, but for me personally, I was feeling at the time like I really needed to kind of stop my negative self-talk and kind of inject myself with this like idea of a really bright future for myself and something filled with a lot of hope and inspiration and possibility. So that was like a really positive thing for me to focus my attention on, I guess, if that makes sense. And again, that was like kind of just for my personal experience. I wasn't even sure if I wanted to make a design out of this, but it just felt really meaningful and personal to me. And I also felt like I really liked this idea. I just noticed a mistake I made in the color work. That's okay. But I really liked the idea of like imagining myself wearing this sweater in that like bright future ahead that I held out hope for. And yeah, I don't know. I think that I'm very susceptible to like believing that the things that I say in my head are true, and often those things are negative. So I think like forcibly interjecting that with something really positive, being like, wow, I'm turning a corner. This is gonna be great. My future's gonna be amazing. Felt like I really needed that at the time. So anyway, I'm not saying that the sweater cured my depression, but we don't have clinical studies. Who's to say it didn't? That's obviously a joke. But yeah, this was a very special, meaningful sweater to me. So that's the deal with this one. I think those are the main things I want to say about it. This one is in testing and it should wrap up in like early mid-March. So I'm hoping for a pattern to release around then. And it's been really fun to see this one come to life through other people's eyes, especially like seeing what colors people are choosing. I think this one will feel just like wild to see out in the world because yeah, I spent so much time with it. I spent so much time with the chart and it just feels so deeply personal. But I hope that, I don't know, maybe other people will have that kind of personal experience with it too. So next up, I have this one that I decided to call the DEUXIEME sweater because I was kind of making it a little bit in a theme with my Prima pullover. This one first appeared as a swatch in my fall 2023 knits inspo video. So I was really craving something with texture, both like in terms of the stitch pattern texture and then also a fuzz, and I was really craving something chocolate brown. And I decided that, and I was very inspired by this like particular Reformation sweater, which was a tie front cardigan. So you may recall that I did wear this one I wore this one in my rhinebeck video recap. So originally I didn't finish this fully in time for rhinebeck. I just like took a little tapestry needle and inserted a ribbon through to close it. I ended up adding a double knit button band all the way around, and I put a buttonhole on either side so I could like swap out the ribbon, which I did swap out from satin ribbon to velvet ribbon, and I thought that was so cute, so pretty. That was 100% channeling and inspired by the Reformation sweater. But then I actually found that I wasn't wearing this very often. So that's kind of a funny thing about designing for your wardrobe. Like sometimes you don't get it right. Sometimes you think you're going to wear something a lot more than you actually do. And the reason I wasn't wearing the tie front version was a couple things. One is that I actually had just made a bunch of like tie front tops. So I had a few different tops I had knitted that had like little ribbon details, and I felt like layering it was kind of funny because it's like too many ribbons on ribbons. You can't have that many layers. It was like confusing visually. I really wanted to wear it with this really cute brown dress that I have, but that one has a little ribbon cinch at the bust, and so it just looked weird with it. But I feel like a tie front cardigan is a little bit funny to wear open. So for that reason, I wasn't gravitating towards it. And then for some reason, I also felt like the color, the tie front, the fuzz, plus I've been gravitating to a lot of flared jeans lately. And for some reason, wearing it with a lot of my flared jeans, I just felt too much like this is something that I would wear in high school, which I'm not really sure, like obviously, you know, mid-early 2000s are coming back, but it just felt like too much of the same time period in a way. It just didn't quite feel right. Like the contrast didn't feel right. I felt like it was too much of one thing in all the outfits that I wanted to wear it with. So the beauty of adding a button band after the fact is that you can just rip it out and change it if you want to change your button size, your button placement, or whether it's button or tie front. So that's what I did. So I tore it back and then I added the button band you see here, which actually has buttonholes spaced along for all of these different buttons. I I chose these buttons basically like crowdsourced. I asked on Instagram what people recommended, and almost everyone said small, round, white buttons, and that's not at all what I was picturing. I was planning to go for like a large tortoiseshell button because I have a store-bought cardigan that I've basically worn to shreds from Madewell that's black with tortoiseshell buttons, and I love that look. That's what I was gonna do here. But I actually really love these little white ones. I think they feel very like classy and classic, I guess. And I'm really liking wearing this cardigan a lot, both buttoned up and unbuttoned. I love a V-neck. I'm just a V-neck girly, so I'm really happy with the way the V-neck fits. And I did add the top button like a ½ inch higher than I wish I did, but I'm not gonna do the button band the third time, so I'm happy with it the way it is. Yeah, I've been wearing this a lot more. Now I feel like when I wear this with my dark wash flare jeans, there's like a contrast there somehow, because it's like kind of a classic cardigan and then a slightly trendier jean cut. I don't know, it just feels more balanced and I feel like more adult, I guess, than when I was wearing the tie front version. I also added pretty long sleeves. I didn't add like a cozy thumb hole opening to wear with like your thumbs out, like my Prima pullover, because I wanted this one to feel a little bit more classic, but I did make them pretty long so I could kind of pull them down fairly low on my hands, and that's just like a very cozy thing for me. I'm like always trying to do that with sweaters anyway, so that's a nice thing of knitting your own. As long as you have the patience to continue knitting kind of an extra few inches on each sleeve, you can have exactly the sleeve length you want. So that's this one, and this one is also in testing right now. The only changes I made between this one and the pattern is I added a little bit less hip increases. That one was honestly just my bad. I accidentally added too many hip increases, like half a repeat extra. That was just me playing it loosey-goosey and not reading my own pattern that closely. I do feel like there's a little bit too much positive ease on my hips, and my hips are a couple inches bigger than the size I knit on my sizing chart. So I figured if it feels a little bit looser than I want and my body is not quite representative of like the ease you should expect based off the sizing chart, I should like make it a little bit more balanced. So that's the only change I really made. And I do have both instructions for the button band with buttonholes and like a tie front version. It's very simple. You just all you do is like the tie front one, the button band's a little bit narrower because it'll like sit next to each other, whereas the button version is a little bit wider because they overlap with each other. And then that's kind of the only difference. And then where you add the buttonholes. But that is something I really, really love about adding a button band on after the fact, is not only do you get to decide the button placement, because I really like to space my buttons out. So there's one at the V-neck or like wherever the high part is, and then one at the very bottom, like a ½ inch from the bottom, and then you can kind of space them out in the remaining space pretty closely. I don't like to have to add a button band as I'm knitting and then decide afterwards like, oh, I don't like where these buttons are placed, but I can't like go back and reknit the whole body. I've actually never made a sweater with an integrated button band, so I don't even know what I'm talking about, but that's why I've never made one, is because I don't find that appealing and I like being able to customize it as I go. The only other like difference that I did with this button band is I really don't like, all the tutorials I looked up have you pick up every single stitch around the whole button band with one set of needles and then start adding the double knit button band with a second set of needles. I didn't do that because I like literally didn't have a cable long enough to pick up every stitch. And I just wasn't even sure if I was gonna like this, especially the first time I did it. So I just didn't wanna go through picking up every single stitch, cutting the yarn, rejoining the yarn. So I made my own tutorial, which I'll have posted before this goes live, of just like picking up as you go and kind of knitting those stitches together as you go. And I think it worked out really well. I think this looks really nice. It looks very finished. This isn't quite picking up on like the fuzz of it. It looks a lot more variegated on the camera than it really does in real life. It's a lot fuzzier in real life, and that was partly why I wanted to add mohair to this yarn, was that I wanted to kind of tone down the tonal variegation, because I tend to gravitate more towards solid yarn, but I really like it on this one. So I'm open to tonal, especially if it's like balanced with a solid color mohair. And I forgot to say what yarn this is. So this is a fingering weight sock yarn held together with a lace weight silk mohair blend. I used Lana Grossa silk hair for the mohair and I loved it. It's so soft. This is the most comfortable mohair I think I've ever felt like against my neck, and I'm pretty sensitive. And then the sock yarn is 80% superwash merino, 10% nylon, 10% cashmere, and that's from a dyer called Fall for Novembers, who I think has retired. I got this like leftover sock yarn from a friend. But yeah, so that was part of why I wanted to hold mohair with it, is to tone down the variegation, and because I didn't quite want to make a fingering weight cardigan at that point. I wanted it to be more like a DK weight. And I really like the drapiness that the mohair gives to this too. It helps the ribbing kind of rest opened up a little bit more. My Prima pullover is with like a worsted wool blend yarn, Barocco vintage worsted, and that one doesn't have mohair or like as drapey of a yarn blend in it. And I find that that one like contracts a lot more. I didn't want this one to be super fitted. I wanted it to be able to have some drape and looseness, because like a cardigan, you're probably gonna wear something underneath it. It's like nice to have a little bit more ease of movement and not quite as form-fitting, especially like around your stomach and waist where you might have like a shirt bunch up underneath. That was my thought process for it. You can totally make this with a DK weight yarn instead. And I'm thinking about maybe doing it another version at some point this summer with like a cotton merino blend and those big tortoiseshell buttons, because I basically want to replace the store-bought cardigan from Madewell from like 5-6 years ago that I've literally is like shredding at the seams. But that would be a lot more fitted of a look, I think. Well, no, I guess maybe not with the cotton. Maybe that would loosen up too. Anyway, I love this one. This one I'm wearing constantly, so I really love it. Okay, let's look quickly at this other cardigan that I made with some yarn that I got at Rhinebeck. This is using Primrose Rowan DK. This is a blend of 60% superwash and 40% non-superwash wool. This is on the more rustic side. As I say that, I'm like pulling out a little kind of pokey hair from it. This is on the more rustic side for yarns that I tend to gravitate towards, and that's just because, like I said, I have really sensitive skin and I tend to get like a high itch factor if I use rustic yarn. My personal wardrobe, I don't love wearing turtlenecks, so it's tough for me to make sweaters that like, you know, touch my neck or any of my like décolletage area and have them be rustic wool. I don't know, I have sensory issues with it. So I do feel like this yarn is borderline a little bit itchy for me, which is a bummer because I made it in a design that's like pretty close to the skin. So I'm counting this one as like 99% finished because I need to knit, like I need to undo this cast off and knit maybe 1 extra inch on the sleeve, and then do the picot hem over again and seam it. So that will not take very long, but I have misplaced my little extra ball of yarn I brought for this on this trip. So maybe I should just seam it so I can actually wear it and then undo the seaming later, I don't know, but that's why it's not quite finished. So this one is knit in, you can kind of see there's like a theme. I definitely have like a comfort zone for how I do a lot of my sweaters and cardigans and tops. I guess I learned that from knitting some My Favorite Things knitwear patterns early on, but I started with the shoulder width and then do some short row shaping for the shoulders and then knit the back to the underarm shaping, and then I pick up the 2 fronts, do the underarm shaping, and then join under the arms with some cast-ons and knit the body in one piece. So that's what I do here too. I have a gradual V-neck because, again, love a V-neck on me personally. And then the kind of different thing about this one is that I added these yarn overholes. It's a little bit hard to see because I need to reblock this one, and or think about a better finishing to prevent the stockinette from curling in the front. I might change this like crochet picot border and instead do a folded hem that's like a little more structurally stable. But you can kind of see here that there's these little yarn over holes going along the front. So those go around the back and then all the way down the front. And my idea for that was I really like the idea of like an adjustable top / cardigan that you can wear a bunch of different ways. I'll add a video that I took of some of the ways that you could style it. You can make it a tie front, you can do it like a corset front, you could do just like a few bows or just 1 bow. I also thought it would be really cool to get some like little jump rings, like gold jump rings or something that you could kind of connect all down the front, but I couldn't find any like easily opened ones at my local craft store, so I haven't done that yet. That was the idea behind it, and I still think that's a pretty cool idea. I really like clothing that you can adjust and wear different ways. I do think that I have kind of a hard time in some of my patterns of just being like, here's the thing. I'm almost always like, optional curved front or hem, optional thumb holes, optional extra long sleeves, optional button front or tie front. You can choose between 5 different color charts. I have a hard time just like limiting to just one. And I think that's part of what's fun about making your own clothing, is that you can customize it. I don't know, my Thine Own top is like the same idea as this. It's like ribbons that you can wear a bunch of different ways. And that's also part of why I try to include little things on how to modify for your own fit too. I just think like, it's so cool that you're making your own clothing, that if you want to like follow what I did, here's how to do it. If you think like your body is similar enough to the sizing chart, you can just follow those steps. But if not, like the sky's the limit in terms of how you want to customize it. And I really like the idea of, especially for like beginners who maybe haven't gone off script yet, or I don't know, just if you hadn't thought of doing something a different way, I like the idea of the pattern giving you little like hints and tips of like, you can pick and choose kind of a la carte exactly what you want your setup to be. Like for my Prima pullover, seeing some people do like a super short fold over collar, a super long one, thumb holes or no thumb holes, curved front hem or no curved front hem, whether or not they customize the bust and waist or hip shaping. It's just, I really like, I feel very gratified seeing people experiment with those things. So that was kind of the idea behind this one. And I do really like that idea. The shaping is very similar to my Ophelia blouse, and then I have basically two princess seams on the front and the back. And that's where all the decreases below the bust happen, and then the increase for the waist. I'm obsessed with that. I think that's something that I'm gonna use on a lot of my designs. I just really, really, really like the way that it falls. I think it just looks very natural for your shape, and I'm a big fan, and I think it's pretty easy to kind of customize those to your own proportions by increasing at a faster rate or a slower rate, etc. It's like pretty easy to add or remove however much circumference you want. I did, again, like a short row sleeve cap on this one. Oh, I forgot to mention, that's what I did for the DEUXIEME cardigan too. This is a sleeve cap that's using short rows. That was something that I first learned in a Lily Kate Makes pattern, and I love doing it that way. I know that some people like to knit their sleeves bottom up and use shaping for a round sleeve cap and then seam it in afterwards. I made one cardigan that way when I was pretty early to knitting. It was the penny cardigan from Wool and the Gang, which they've since discontinued, sadly, because I get messages about that sometimes. But I found that kind of a pain to seam. Like, it's a little bit nerve-wracking because you're seaming a curve, and I found that mine bunched a little bit, and I mean, partly I wasn't that experienced at seaming at the time, but whenever I can do something top down and whenever I can do it seamless, I tend to gravitate towards that because I like the process better too. So yeah, this is with short rows, and I think it works out great. I'll try to reshare a blog post I found about calculating how to do the sleeve cap, so you can kind of calculate it with more confidence versus I used to just eyeball it, but I think it works out great. I did kind of extra long sleeves again, and I added a little picot hem on the bottom and on the sleeves. I do think I'm gonna redo this neckline and add a little picot folded hem instead of the picot crochet, because you can see it does kind of curl inwards. But I love this color yarn. I mean, that was really why I chose it. I think I felt a little bit of pressure to buy yarn at Rhinebeck, or not pressure, like FOMO. I didn't feel like anyone expected me to, and I didn't feel like I needed to show off yarn that I got, but I felt like, I don't know, everyone was buying yarn. I felt a little bit of FOMO to not buy some. So I don't know if I really regret this yarn or not, but I do think it's like a little bit rough for me for such a close to the skin design. So I feel a little bit ambivalent about it for that reason. I do think that like often a lot of yarn will soften up as you wear it, and I've only blocked this one once. I haven't really worn it because I didn't finish that sleeve. So I think there's still opportunity for this to be something that I do reach for. And I do find it comfortable otherwise. I really like the shape. I really like the fit. I feel really good about that. And yeah, I don't know. It's just the yarn is a little touch prickly for me. So we'll see. But I do really, really deeply love this color. It's like a dark, rich kind of cherry cola almost. And I think that fits my aesthetic really well. I feel really confident in that kind of color. So yeah, I'm not sure about making a pattern for this one. I'm open to it because I did the grading for it. I swear, and I'm so sorry about this, like, I really get hung up on the administrative stuff at the end of coming up with the pattern, like how to format when you have all these really close-fitting designs where you're like, oh, ideally you'd want this neckline to increase at this rate, and then this rate, and then the armhole is happening at this rate. And it can just be kind of a lot to put that all into a pattern and like figure out how to make it readable and not like 50 pages. I think maybe sometimes I'm a little bit like, I need to accept that done is better than perfect, because no matter what you do with the pattern, there will be people who don't like the formatting or don't like the design. So I can't really, I need to just do things instead of worry that I'm not going to do them perfectly. But that's kind of why I kind of pause on this one for a sec. So yeah, but I do like this design a lot. And this was something that I had floating around in my head for like months and months since last year, like early last year. Actually, I'll add a clip. I had originally what became my Ophelia blouse. I was originally starting as this top, and then I pivoted, but I went through like a horrible unraveling, frogging disaster of trying to go back and close up the yarn over holes before I just scrapped that whole version and started over again. But like, is this supposed to look like that? The answer is no. No, it's not. But yeah, that was like how early on, like early last summer, I think that this idea was like going around in my head a little bit. So I'm glad that I made it and like saw that through to completion. Okay, last finished object. This one I'm gonna say 99.9% finished, because the only thing I have left to do is block it. And this is a wrap cardigan that I just cast off and seamed last night. Let me like tie it up for you to make it a little bit clearer. But in the meantime, I'll tell you, I knit this using Cascade 220. And I got it at this really cute yarn shop called Imagine It in San Francisco. It really makes me wish that I had learned to knit back when I lived in San Francisco, because I wish that that was my local yarn shop. I do have a great local yarn shop near me too, but I think that I often am looking for specific colors or yarn blends that they don't cater to as much. There's a lot of rustic yarn there, and I think that like my particular color palette, I'm clearly like very dark leaning in a lot of my color choices, and I feel like that's just not the most popular with like other knitters around me maybe. So I really wanted to get this yarn before this trip to California that I'm on, so that I had something to work on the plane, etc. But I wasn't able to source navy blue worsted yarn in Vermont before I left. I almost committed to this like kind of teal-ish Barocco vintage that I thought was navy in the store, but when I got home was like, no, this is really teal. But there is something about just a really perfect desaturated navy blue that I really wanted. Like this, yeah, I guess this kind of shows it's like close to black, but not black, but very neutral, doesn't have green in it. It's really just like a dark navy. And I think that's like my favorite neutral to wear probably. I really like navy, I think because I have kind of high contrast coloring. And so I feel like a dark saturated color looks best on me, or like I feel the best in. But navy is like a little bit, I don't know, it's a little bit softer than black, and I also feel like sometimes it kind of pulls out a little bit of the red in my hair, which I like, so that's why I gravitate towards it so much. But I realized I don't have any hand knit navy sweaters, so that felt like a good gap in my wardrobe. So I went to Imagine It in San Francisco. Sorry, this is like a meandering story. But I went to Imagine It in San Francisco and I looked through all their yarn, and they had Cascade 220, which I already know I really like in general. And then I will say the people helping me there were so great and fun. I liked that two of the people at Imagine It separately, without even overhearing each other, when they were like looking at my purchase of this yarn, were like, wow, that's a great navy, which like, I felt so seen. It is a great navy, and a great navy is worth waiting for in my opinion. So I'm glad that I stuck it out and I didn't commit to like the teal yarn. So let's talk about, a wrap sweater is just so awkward to hold up. Like wrap sweaters and tie sweaters, I feel like are just weird to show off of your body. I'll add in a clip of me wearing it to make this whole process less ridiculous. But I was inspired for the silhouette of this design actually from a store-bought cardigan that I have. I bought it before I started knitting in like early 2020, and it's from And Other Stories. I think it's like a staple that they have. It's still in stock. I got mine in like a light heather gray, and I love it because it feels like the combo of like slightly elegant, because it has the little, a wrap cardigan always gives me a little bit of like ballerina off-duty vibes. But since it's oversized, it feels like very casual and comfy. I wear it with jeans, I wear it with sweatpants, I wear it with dresses. And I like that it has this waist defining tie that hits at your natural waist, but then it has a couple inches of ribbing after that. So I feel like I can wear it with a high-waisted jeans or a dress and get waist definition, but not have my stomach exposed. And I personally gravitate towards things that have waist definition. So I feel like that's a great combo, is like having an oversized comfy sweater that still manages to have waist definition and has a very easy going casual element to it. So that was the template for this one, basically. It was that I was like, I really wish I had that in navy. And then I thought, okay, are there any patterns that look just like this that I could knit that are in navy? Because for some reason I felt a little bit intimidated by designing the diagonal front. I don't know why, I just have never done it before. Like figuring out how much it should cross over and at what angle and would the V-neck be deep enough, etc. So I looked for other ones, but I really wanted it to be a drop shoulder or like a modified drop shoulder. And I wanted a lot more ease in the body, and I wanted slightly ballooned sleeves in that I wanted there to be more ease down the sleeves and then a tighter cuff. So I decided to make my own, and that's how I came up with this one. It has 6 inches of positive ease at the bust, but then the waist, since it goes down into 1x1 ribbing, cinches in quite a bit, but still gives you like the full stretch as if you had all of the width of your bust if you want more movement and stretch and comfort around your stomach. It has short row shaping at the upper shoulder, and I'm actually really happy with this like slightly different short row shaping technique that I did this time. It's probably gonna be a little bit hard to see, but you can see that the short rows scoop down a little bit for the back. So I'll show that in comparison. So you can see here, there's like a little scoop, right? Whereas on this guy, my DEUXIEME cardigan, it's like just a straight trapezoid. This doesn't actually scoop across the back. This is straight. And I did that by going about my normal short row turns, but I actually worked each shoulder separately. And I had you turn, like, here's this, like, these are stitch markers marking the back of the neck. I'd have you go on the shoulder and then go one past the stitch marker and then do your short row turn and then come back one past that previous short row turn, etc. So you're like, this slope is at this rate and this slope is like very slow, just one stitch at a time. So that kind of makes this like general slope, but then like a slight curve, very gentle scoop back. I don't know, that's a really little difference, but for some reason I just like that better. So I feel happy about that. This is again a modified drop shoulder, and I'm really liking not having a super low armhole depth on a modified drop shoulder. I think you still get this like looseness, but it just doesn't get to that like super saggy, super oversized sleeves, you know, drop shoulder down to the waist that you can get, especially as you move towards plus size designs if you do like a classic drop shoulder silhouette. So I'm really happy with that. I think it looks how I want it to. I did a 1x1 rib because I thought about doing 2x2 rib. I was just feeling a 1x1 kind of closer to my source inspiration, and that let me do pretty easily an Italian tubular bind off. That's something that I avoid almost at all costs, but it just felt right for this one to have a really nice finished edge that's still quite stretchy, and I do think it was worth it. I get really frustrated trying to do an Italian tubular bind off on like 2x2 ribbing, for instance, so that was another benefit of doing it on 1x1 rib. I did that on the sleeves too. I made the sleeves kind of long, and I have a gradual taper from the upper arm to the wrist. The upper arm I think has about 3.5 inches of positive ease, and the wrist has 3, but you know, your wrist gets smaller than your upper arm anyway, so then it goes into the 1x1 ribbing for the cuff, and I think that gives a little bit of a balloon without it being unwieldy. Like it feels fitted, but you just have a little bit of looseness and like ease to it that gives kind of the like relaxed oversized look. Other things to say, I added this double knit button band front. I mean, no buttonholes, just a finishing edge. I don't know why I waited so long to learn how to do a double knit edging. I think I'm gonna put it on so many of my designs from now on. I mean, having like a ribbed button band is really cute in certain contexts, but I think there's just something so nice about a double knit edge that looks very finished and polished. And I felt like I needed it for this one because I really wanted it to tie in with the tie, which has a double knit. Like it's the same width as the band that you add. The band is like curling in a little bit right now, just a little bit, but I haven't blocked this, like I said, because I'm in this Airbnb and my swatch did bleed a little bit of the navy, and so I'm really worried about like staining the Airbnb's towels, so I need to borrow like a junk towel from my friends. But I also didn't want to do it right before this video because it's raining a lot in San Diego right now, and so I think that it will take a while to dry because everything's so humid, so I didn't want to like not be able to show you the things I was talking about before I filmed this, so I'll probably try and block this tonight. My swatch didn't grow very much when I blocked it, so hopefully all is well. The other thing that I decided to do, and this was to kind of match my existing store-bought cardigan, is that I wanted this tie to be fully wrap around and functional. So there's like a little hole on the right side that goes over, and the tie passes through that hole like so, and then goes around your back to tie on this side. And the reason I wanted that is I did want you to be able to like cinch it a little bit tighter if you wanted to. And if you just have the tie seamed here, you can't really adjust that quite as much. So I like the idea that you could wear this like a little bit looser and have a little bit lower of a deep V and have the bow kind of be towards the front almost, like still an overlap, but have the bow be here, or you can pull it tighter and have the bow be on the side and still have that be like a natural, if you want it to be a little bit more cinched, but like still oversized fit at the bust. I tend to wear my store-bought cardigan both ways. Sometimes I have it crossing quite high up, and I think that's nice for like wearing it to work too. That you just feel like a little covered up and warmer, but then you can also wear it tied more loosely and it's like a little bit deeper of a V. So those were the thoughts behind the functional waist tie. I kind of tried to make this like beginner friendly. So I had thought about adding some like waist shaping, and I found that like waist shaping and armhole shaping at the same time as a V-neck could get a little bit overwhelming because either you need to like write out every size, here's what you're doing on this row, here's what you're doing on this row, or you have to ask people to keep track of two things at once in their heads, and that can get a little bit tough for like beginner, early intermediate knitters. So I try to keep this one semi-basic, but adding some nice finishing details. Like I think that you could, if you wanted to, you could go without the short row shaping on the back. It's just like 1.5 inches. It's really not a whole lot, but I do think it makes a nice little difference. But you could go without that if you want. You could not do an Italian tubular bind off. And you can also choose a different finishing and not do the double knit band if you didn't want to, although I think beginners will find that surprisingly approachable. So I don't know, this is me kind of trying to think about like adding in to my, I guess, like design repertoire. Those are kind of my thoughts about adding, I think with this wrap cardigan and then also with the DEUXIEME cardigan, trying to add a little bit of like wardrobe staples that feel polished. You could lounge in them or you could wear them to work and just feel kind of like an elevated basic, because I feel like I went pretty hard with some of my early designs of like, I want to make something that no one else really has, like my Thine Own top and the Ophelia blouse and my tarot card sweater and tied and true. I was like, I want this to be very different from anything else I could find. And I do find that very like creatively satisfying, but I do think there's also something very satisfying for a lot of people of just like having a really nice, well-made cardigan or sweater that you want to wear every day. And I don't know, I know that a lot of people don't think about knitting for warmer weather, so I wanted to make some things that feel like, I don't know, fill out my like hand knit sweater wardrobe, if that makes sense. Yeah, so that was like the inspiration for this one. So this one, I haven't finished writing up a pattern for it. I like did all the grading in my grading spreadsheet, but I need to go through and do my most dreaded phase, which is the actual formatting, where I figure out like, which of these sizes can I group together? Are there ways that I can like write this out as a repeat and not have to write as much? Honestly, that's kind of my least favorite part of this entire process, which is ironic because that part reminds me the most of coding, where you're like trying to refactor things and think like, well, what chunks of these get repeated and which things share certain elements in common. And I want to be able to like write as few things as possible, but still have it be readable so you understand what's happening and you're not guessing about it. That feels like kind of the same thought process as writing like really readable code that's like easily testable and things like that, where it's like obvious what your stitch counts should be at different points because you like have broken it down into little chunks. That's kind of like the equivalent of like lots of little functions that you can write unit tests against. Anyway, it's just, that's like ironic that I feel like is the most similar to my career profession and is the least appealing part, but maybe that's why, is that I feel like I go towards knitting because I'm looking for things that feel less abstract and feel more tangible and fun and creative. But that's the deal with this one. I'd love to know if you have any name suggestions for this cardigan. None have come to me yet, but I really am excited to release a pattern for this one. So keep an eye out for a tester call for this one. And hopefully that will be like, while the weather is still cold, probably starting sometime in February. Very last thoughts. I also got this yarn. It's a Malabrigo Susura, which is 100% silk fingering weight. It's heavier and much silkier than the Knitting for Olive pure silk, which I was thinking about that, but this one just felt so delicious and luxurious. Also got this at Imagine It. They have so many beautiful silk yarns. I have not been able to find many silk yarns in Vermont, so that was amazing. And I haven't decided. I either want to do a one shoulder top or maybe like a boat neck tank. So I don't know. Tell me which one. I haven't decided, but I just finished this project, so I need to like start doing some math and cast one on soon. So that's the idea for this one, and I like maybe this could somehow become my first dress. I know that silk can get weighed down a little bit by itself, but I just feel like that would be so like sensual, black silk. I don't know, it feels so good. So that's a maybe. But I'm just swatching for that one with US 3 needles. Oh, I forgot to say, this one is on US 7 and then US 6 for the ribbing. My camera is gonna die, perfect timing. I feel like I just finished. I have several works in progress that I left in Vermont. I'll introduce to you when I'm back in Vermont, but for now, these are what I got with me here. And I'm really excited to finish these and to start this one. And if there are any questions that I didn't talk about or themes I didn't talk about for any of these, feel free to ask. And thanks so much for joining. I forgot if I said this, I'm Tamara, this is Star-Crossed Knits. If you enjoyed this, I always appreciate a like or a comment or a subscribe if you want to follow along for more knitting stuff. And yeah, I hope I'll see you soon.